What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video and welcome back, kind of. I know it's not the official start to the season, more so of a preseason race. A lot of people don't come around until the Daytona 500, so I won't do the official welcome back party yet, but for those of you here, I do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to a new season. I'm looking forward to the Busch Clash this week. I did enjoy the event last year at the LA Coliseum, and I think this year it should be solid once again. But yeah, just excited to be back for another season. I have a lot of fun things planned, and you guys know I love my NASCAR DFS community. You guys show me a ton of support, so I try to at least show the love back by at least revamping some stuff or doing new updates, which I did revamp the entire NASCAR model this season. For those of you that are members on Patreon, you'll have access to that throughout the season. And if you're not a member, I'd highly recommend doing that. You can join the Discord, get access to all the projections, sheets, the models, simulations, all that fun stuff, and my optimizer, which has my ownership projections and all that good stuff. You know where to find it. Link down below in the description or the pinned comment. And one of the ways I do want to give back to the community here is I did create a free general chat portion of my premium Discord. I've always had that. I run it each and every single day for the Patreon members. But for those of you that aren't able to join for whatever reason, I wanted to give you guys a place to come in, chat, chill with me or any other members, or if you have any questions, because I know I only do one live stream per week, and maybe you have other questions throughout the week. So if you want to come in and join, hang out, I think it should be a good time. I'll drop the link down below and you can join for free. But anyway, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Chris Pennell. I break down NASCAR DFS each and every single week on this channel. And you can also find me over on Stochastic doing some NASCAR content over there and baseball when the season comes. And you can also find me live on Sunday mornings or evenings, just depends on when the race is going to be, doing a live stream, hanging out with you guys and answering any single question that you may have. And the live stream this week, the plan is for 6 p.m. on Sunday. I believe that's when the heat races are going on. Can't really do it after the heat races because I have to post the content, do projections and stuff, and that's going to be kind of hard to do at the same time doing a live stream. So I figured if we can just watch the heat races together, we'll talk through it, chalk some strategy, and then around 7 o'clock or something around there, I can get off and hopefully get everything up for you guys. But the plan is for 6 p.m. on Sunday. Might not be as busy as normal since it's not the actual start to the season, but I'd love to see you there. And what I like to do in these videos each and every single week is kind of go over a preview of what to expect in this race, the strategy behind how many dominators we're going to play or how we should approach this race, talk about the track a little bit and things like that. And then we kind of go driver by driver, breaking down the entire slate. And then I say sayonara, and I see you guys on the live streams on Sundays. But there's really not too much to it. Try to keep it as simple as possible, but I am a little bit long-winded because I try to cover everything, and I just enjoy talking about it. But hey, if that all sounds fine and dandy to you, it's going to be one small thing in return. It's, a like on the video, subscribing to the channel if you are new, and you think I'm going to keep coming back each and every single week of this season. And feel free to leave a comment down below. Being nice, being mean, I don't really care either way, but I'd love to hear from you. All right, so moving on to the preview portion of this race, there's actually a lot to talk about. Now, the LA Coliseum, it's a very short, flat track. I'm calling it mini Martinsville for the most part. It's a quarter mile in length, and we're gonna have 27 cars instead of 23 this time. So not gonna be too much space, probably gonna be some bumping and banging. I'd love to see 40 cars on there. That'd be absolutely awesome, but we're getting 27, which is good enough, I guess. But there's going to be kind of some gimmicks, not really so during the race. It's a 150 lap race, but it's going to be more so before the race because it's not just your practice and qualifying and there's your order. So on Saturday, we'll have a 2-hour practice session, which is really nice. Now, I am recording this video pre-practice and qualifying, and I figured we kind of cover that on the live stream. So I do apologize. I just have a lack of info here, but nothing I can really do just because I don't want to post a video on Sunday morning, then do a live stream a few hours after that because it's just like I'm doing the same thing over and over. So this is more so of a preview and kind of a picks video, but it was just nice to see you guys. So I was excited to do this. But anyway, how this weekend is going to work, we have a 2-hour practice session. We have qualifying on Saturday, but that's not going to set the lineup for the race on Sunday. This is to set the lineup for the heat races. So basically, the better you qualify, the better your starting position is going to be in each heat race. There is 4 heat races, and the top 5 finishers in each one will advance to the main event. And then there's going to be a last chance qualifier for the guys that did not advance in their heat races. And then the top 3 in each one is going to advance to the final race. And then whoever's left that has the most points from 2022, they'll advance to the last spot in the heat race. I hope I said that correctly. There's just a lot to remember. I do have it on the left side of my screen. I didn't look at it, but I think we're good for the most part. But yeah, there's going to be 27 spots, 150 lap main event, and there's going to be a stage break on lap 75. So I'm basically just viewing this as a mini Martinsville race. I don't think passing is going to be extreme, although last year in the optimal lineup, we did see some guys with some good place differential like Eric Jones, Kevin Harvick moved a little bit, Can't remember exactly where everyone started, but there was a few guys that moved closer to the front, but for the most part, the dominators were starting in the front of the pack. So if you're wondering what that means as far as building lineups is concerned, I am basically just trying to build lineups with guys that can finish high. I mean, there's just not going to be enough time for there to be substantial place differential, in my opinion. Now, there was a handful of drivers that did wreck out, which I could see that happening once again. So we had a 23 car field last season, only 18 finished. Everyone else either had issues. I remember Justin Haley getting slammed by Kyle Larson, which was unfortunate for my lineups. But really, I would just pick maybe a dominator or two, some guys up front, and then guys that you think can finish well. Now, the pricing is super soft this week, so you can pretty much build whatever lineup you want, which is kind of fun. But overall, just viewing this as a mini Martinsville and just trying to get high finishers because there's really not that much time for anything else. All right, so moving on to the driver-by-driver breakdown portion of this video. Going to be a little bit more difficult than normal since we do not have qualifying or practice, and that's something that gets inputted heavily on my projections. So again, I can be swayed a lot on what I say right now, but this is going to be kind of a broad look at the slate here, looking at the pricing, how I expect these drivers to play out, and some other things like that. I can show you guys a few extra things on the model that I normally wouldn't on YouTube just because it's the Clash and I don't mind giving away some stuff, and I can introduce you some of the new stuff that we have added for the season. But like I said, pricing, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can play like 4 guys in the 9K range and grab a couple of scrubs, and even then the scrubs are not that expensive. Like we have Ty Gibbs down here at $5,300, Haley 54, Stenhouse at 5K, so pretty much play whatever lineup you want. Now, some of the guys are not going to make the final race. I'm assuming it's going to be some of those lower priced drivers, but you never know. Could get hit with a couple of surprises. But a couple of things new that I did add this year, just the layout for some of these things. Now, the numbers that you're looking at for projections and stuff, don't take that to heart because there's obviously no qualifying, so you can't even make projections. There's just some placeholder numbers. But we do have that for DraftKings, FanDuel, and then I also have it for Prize Picks as well this season. We have the driver sim scores, which are updated, which will have ownership, optimal percentage after you run some sims on that, the leverage, top dom, and win percentage numbers, which, again, don't take those to heart because we don't have all the data that we need right now. And I also have that for FanDuel as well. We have the power rankings, the betting value, so my win percentage based on the sims compared to the Vegas odd and implied probability, and I'll give you leverage there, and a bunch of other things, which the list goes on, similar track guide, team chart if you do need that. So just some things that I've added new for this season. But let's start off top with our champion from last year, Joey Logano, 10,200, 12.5 over on FanDuel. He's got the best odds to win this race, tied by Chase Elliott, and rightfully so. He's ranking on the preliminary results first in just about all of my model runs. And it makes sense. He won the Clash last year. We do have limited data to work with as far as the Clash is concerned. So a lot of the data that I'm using is just short, flat tracks. I did add the Clash in there, but very slightly just because it's an outlier race. And, you know, if something happened to you poorly, you're going to have a bad finish, which is skewed heavily. Like for Tyler Reddick, he had one of the best cars there. He was leading laps early on, ends up getting wrecked out. So, I mean, what are you going to do there? But, yeah, I like Joey to win this race as of right now. Again, things can change after practice and qualifying, but he had the best average green flag speed at the short flat tracks last year, similar tracks. And if you're looking at the season, he was obviously very strong. He won the championship race, and some of these are blank because we do not have all the data we need. But those will be filled out when the time comes. But anyway, recent track history here, we're using pretty much short flat tracks from last year, plus the Clash race. We also have the similar track history and the season history, but let's be honest, it's just probably not going to matter too much. I think everything we need here is probably from the short flat tracks, which tend to be a little bit more predictable. But anyway, Joey Logano here, he's going to be the favorite. I mean, he's averaging the most DraftKings points per race of these track types since last season. The most DraftKings points per race, had the most wins, tied for the most top 10s, and some of the most dominant points, and had the most laps led per race. So Joey, assuming he doesn't just absolutely screw it up in qualifying or practice, he will be the favorite, and I'm assuming high ownership is well in his future. Chase Elliott, $10,000, time for the best odds to win here with Joey Logano. Wasn't quite as good at the short flat tracks last year, and years prior, he was right up there with the top dogs at the short flats. Kind of took a step back last season, only 2 top 10s, but still a good amount of dom winner points. It's really just going to come down to who starts in the field a little bit higher. I mean, if one of these guys is on the pole, they'll probably dominate the most. That's really what's going to come down to. So we'll know more after qualifying, but these are definitely 2 of the favorites here. I don't think anyone should have any doubts about that. And that does reflect over in Vegas. Christopher Bell is someone that I think can definitely be a contender to win this race at $9,700, tied for the second best odds there, only behind Logano and Chase Elliott. But every single time we're at a short flat track, Christopher Bell has to be on our radar. It's his bread and butter, by far his best track type. 2 wins, 3 top 5, and 7 top 10s last year, and a good chunk of dominator points. So I would look for him to be a contender, and it would not surprise me at all if he ended up winning this race, but took a big step forward last year, was good just about everywhere, and I'm expecting big things once again from Christopher Bell. Kyle Larson at $9,500. He is oddly the worst one at these track types out of this entire group here. Obviously, he's on a great car, great team, and arguably the best driver in all of NASCAR, just talent-wise, but short flats are really not the ones that I tend to roster him at a ton, especially a track that's similar to Martinsville, which is not a really good track for him. And as you can see here, by far the worst average DraftKings points per race and 12.7 average finish. Decent running position, but just not really a guy that dominates too much or picks up wins at these track types much. So out of the guys we've talked about so far, he's probably my least favorite. But again, if he starts on the pole, I'll definitely have a lot of interest. Ryan Blaney, $9,300. He's another guy that's popping in my model a lot. Excellent at the short flat tracks. Teammates with Joey Logano, and they're both just really good at these track types. The second most DraftKings points per race last year. Second best average finish. The second best running position. Had 5 top 5s, which is more than any single driver. Even better than Joey Logano, and a good chunk of dominator points. So Blaney is someone that I have a ton of interest in. As of right now, he's pretty cheap at $9,300, and I feel like the ownership's going to end up being high, but I want to be a part of it. Definitely love Blaney. Kyle Busch, $9,100. We finally have something to talk about as far as silly season is concerned, because he's our first driver we're going to talk about that changed teams, changed things like that. So he is no longer in the M&M car, 18 for Joe Gibbs. He moved on to the 8-car RCR, replacing Tyler Reddick, who went to the 45 car for 2311 Racing. So it's going to be really weird not seeing Kyle Busch in the 18 car, now in the 8 car, $9,100. I would say it's a little bit of a downgrade going from Joe Gibbs to RCR, but he's still one of the most talented drivers in the field, and I'm going to be kind of curious to see how Kyle Busch performs in his first season away from Joe Gibbs. Still some excellent odds in this race, plus 900, which is only behind Larson, Bell, Elliott, and Logano, so Vegas isn't too concerned about that. We've seen Tyler Reddick have some really good races and dominant performances in that 8-car last year, so as long as there's a talented driver behind the wheel, the equipment's good enough to win races and dominate, so I don't have too many concerns there. Kyle Busch wasn't the optimal last year at this race. He started on the pole at a good chunk of laps, actually lost lead to Tyler Reddick early on, ended up getting it back, and was on his way to being optimal. Just not as great at the short flat tracks as some of the other tracks for him. Only 2 top 5s last year, but still 7 top 10s and 8 top 15s, which was actually more than a single driver. But if you look at the dominator performance, it just wasn't as high as some of the others. Only 14.6 laps led per race compared to some of the others, which is behind Blaney, Bell, Elliott, and Logano. I still think he's fine. The price point's really low, and if he happens to be in a good starting spot for us for DFS purposes, have to have some interest in Busch at that price point. Dropping down to the 8K range, we have Ross Chastain at $8,900. Seems like a pretty cheap price point for him, but we know he can be very hit or miss. It's either wreckers or checkers, it seems like, for Ross Chastain. And he was a guy, if you rostered him last year, there was a lot of good times and there was a lot of bad times. And there was a stretch of races where I felt like he couldn't finish better than top 30. He was running like in first or second place every single time, but he just ends up wrecking out. But obviously one of the most talented drivers in the field. Trackhouse Racing took a huge step forward last year. I'm not sure they're going to be able to be as good as they were last season. I think after a year of experience for everybody, the top teams will just perform a little bit better. And teams like Trackhouse, and just not really like the outsider teams, but just not like the dominant 3 of like Penske, Hendrick, and Joe Gibbs. I don't think they're going to be able to surprise as much as they did last season. RFK being another example where they had a couple of surprise races. But I still think Trackhouse will be a threat, and Ross Chastain will certainly have his races where he's contending to win. I'm just not sure it's going to be as consistent as last season. I still like Ross here, but it just comes down to how he practices and qualifies. We have Denny Hamlin here at $8,600, who, per my model last year, was the best driver once you remove the super speedways, which can always be a bit tricky in some of the road courses. But Hamlin was excellent last year, but he too had a lot of bad luck, especially early on in the season. That kind of corrected itself later on, which most things do, return to the mean at some point. But I think he's going to, if I had a bet on a championship winner right now, I think my money's on Denny Hamlin. He was great last year, just bad luck aside, which I think skews some people's viewpoints of him. But I mean, right now, he was good just about everywhere last year, and Toyota was really, really strong. And if they can back that up once again this year, I think we're in store for a pretty good year for Denny Hamlin. I like this price point. He's good at short flats. Definitely someone to watch out for. William Byron, $8,400, was really good at the short flats last year. Had that one absolutely dominant race at Martinsville, which I think is the most similar track to the Busch Clash here at the LA Coliseum. So if he ends up starting close to the front, he's a threat to dominate for sure. At $8,400, the price just seems a little bit low. I think he could honestly be more expensive than Kyle Busch, just the way he performed last year at similar tracks. But he too is another guy that had some terrible luck where he couldn't grab a top 10 finish for like a couple months, it seems like. Tyler Reddick, $8,100. I feel like a lot of people are going to flock to him just because he's in the new car this season, the 45 car for 2311 Racing. But short flat tracks, not good for him at all. And I was running some of the preliminary stuff, and seems like he's really overvalued for me. Now, I think $8,100 is going to stand out to a lot of people as being undervalued, but he was just not good at these track types this year. He's much better at road courses, intermediates. Short flats just were not something to be having a good time with Tyler Reddick with. He had 4 top 20s, but 2 top 15s, only 1 top 10 finish, and only 5 laps led per race. He did start on the front row last year, and he actually grabbed the lead from Kyle Busch early on. So, I mean, obviously his car didn't suck, but ended up having an issue where he finished near the back of the pack. So I am not a huge fan of Reddick here. Probably someone that I would feel comfortable with avoiding unless he just happens to get on the pole where he's going to probably lead an automatic like 50, 70 laps. But outside of that, probably going to be underweight on the field if he's going to end up being really chalky. Dropping to the 7K range, Kevin Harvick, who I think is one of the best plays in the slate here. He's definitely undervalued in my opinion at $7,800. Great at short flat tracks, his bread and butter. I actually had a win at one last year at Richmond, had 4 top 5s, 6 top 10s. Wasn't really a dominator, but he was able to get fast laps, and he was optimal, I believe, at the Clash last year. Moved his way through the field a little bit. And also the narrative of his being his last season. Now, is that going to help him or hurt him? I am not sure quite yet, but I do think he's underpriced. I think he should honestly be more expensive than Chastain, Kyle Busch, and Tyler Reddick, just given how well he performed last year at these kind of track types. So the value does look pretty good to me. Brad Keselowski, $7,500. When he was on Team Penske, super good at these track types last year. Wasn't really the case. It wasn't terrible for being in a downgraded car, RFK, but still only 25.9 DraftKings points per race. Only had 1 top 5, 2 top 10s. He's okay. It's just going to depend on where he qualifies. I don't really have a strong stance on Keselowski. Martin Truex Jr., $7,300. I feel like he kind of threw this race to the side last year. I mean, I think he was like really unmotivated, if I remember correctly. Ended up gaining some spots, but still wasn't a super impressive race. We know he's really good at short flat tracks and excellent at Martinsville, probably the best driver at Martinsville over the past couple of seasons, but last year just didn't really have it at some of the tracks. Now, some he did, and I feel like Truex is always a great play when he was under owned, just because no one played him, and that's when he ended up balling out. And when he was chalky, he just didn't end up paying off. At least that was my experience with Truex last year. I mean, he was still fine at the short flats last season. Had a good chunk of dominator points, 32 laps led per race, and a decent amount of fast laps. The price is good, but we'll just see if the car and the team is ready for this weekend, which I think we'll kind of see if he's really gearing up for this one on Saturday during practice and qualifying. If it looks like he just doesn't really care, well, maybe we should avoid him. But that'll be a TBT kind of thing. We'll talk about that on the live stream. Chase Briscoe, $7,100. I don't think this is going to be a bad race for him at all. Did have a win in the short flat track last year, typically a top 10, top 15 contender. And I like the price point here. I mean, $7,100 is pretty cheap for a guy that honestly has race winning upside. We know he's got speed, but he's another guy that can be very hit or miss, but the talent is certainly there for him. Dropping out of the 6K range, which sounds weird to say with a guy like Alex Bowman, but this pricing is really soft, so it is what it is. But he was, to put it lightly, just not good at these track types last year. Average finish barely inside the top 20. Did not have 1 top 5 finish and only had 1 top 10. So he's cheap for a reason. I know that's good name value there for a Hendrick Motorsports car below 7K, but this was his worst track type for sure last season. Bubba Wallace at $6,700. Bubba was surprising. There was a lot of races where I thought Bubba was a pretty bad play, and he just ended up kind of sticking where he started, especially in the second half portion of the year. Just was very, very solid. And I think Bubba's going to have a pretty decent year this season, especially if he can continue or at least improve upon the strides he made last season. He even got a win under his belt at a legit race, which was really nice to see at Kansas. But I don't think Bubba's a terrible play here. Kind of has some similar numbers to Alex Bowman, but he does have some better finishes. 3 top 15s, 2 top 10s, and did have a top 5 under his belt. Daniel Suarez, another guy where the name value is decent. Did have some pretty good races with Trackhouse last year, but just did not perform with the short flats last season. So he's another guy that I feel like I'm just not going to get to as much of unless he's starting in the very back as a PD play. Sure, but that's, again, a TBT thing after qualifying and practice. Eric Jones, he was in the optimal last year for the Clash. Kind of surprised me, kind of ripped through the field. Did look pretty good. Short flats weren't amazing for him last season. 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, but for his price point, I guess I can't get too picky. So if he happens to be just a major PD play, I'll play him. If not, well, I guess we'll see what the projections lay out for him. Chris Buescher, $6,100. I'd kind of throw him in the same category as the other drivers we talked about, and Brad Keselowski, which I'm not sure why Keselowski is so much more expensive than Chris Buescher. I mean, if you look at their numbers last year, Keselowski at the short flats had an average finish of 16.8. Chris Buescher had an average finish of 15.1. So I think there's a big price discrepancy there in the two teammates who should run pretty similar. And honestly, Buescher was a little bit better last season. So if I had to pick between the two, I mean, Buescher looks like a much better value to me. But again, we'll have to wait and see how these guys qualify. Ryan Preece, another driver that had some big changes heading into the season. He's now in the 41 car, replaced Cole Custer, thankfully. I hated playing Cole Custer. It never ended well for me, ever. Although Custer, I think, was in the optimal last year for the Clash race. Didn't do too bad. But Preece, I think he's a better driver than Custer. Obviously, Stuart Haas thought the same thing. So it's $6,000. I know we had a couple races where, he's dirt cheap because he's in a more so of a scrubby car, but definitely has an upgraded equipment from some of the times we saw him in seasons past. So I think Preece is definitely got to watch out for this year and does have some top 15 upside in my opinion. Dropping down to the 5K range, we have short flat track specialist Eric Almirola here, $5,900. Did not end up retiring. 12.8 running position last season, 3 top 10s, and a pretty good driver rating compared to all these other cheap drivers. Almirola does look like a decent value here just because we know he can run well at these track types, so he's definitely someone to look out for. Edgy Allmendinger, another guy that has some upside at these track types, 35 DraftKings points per race last season with an average finish inside the top 18. Don't mind him. Did have a couple of top 10s. Austin Dillon, $5,700. Another guy that's really not that bad at short flat tracks. I think Dillon, Almirola should be in the higher 6K range. Probably replace him with maybe a Bowman, Suarez, Jones even maybe. I just feel like these guys are better at the short flat tracks than what their price tag represents. But, they kind of relied on Vegas for some of the pricing, which I guess I get it, but I think Dillon's a little bit too cheap there. Definitely someone to watch out for. Austin Cindric's another guy that was pretty solid at the short flats. Like Austin Dillon last season had 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and 5 top 15s. I don't think there's really any reason he should be below 6K compared to some of the other drivers he's priced below. And Cindric, same thing you said for him. He had 5 top 15 finishes. Didn't have anything better than that, but consistent top 15 finisher and good equipment. Team Penske typically runs well with these track types. I think it's another driver that does provide some decent value here. Noah Gragson, he's moving on from the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series in the 42 car for formerly Petty GMS, now Legacy Motor Club. Kind of a weird name. I don't love it, but we know he's a talented driver, but I don't have super high expectations for him in this race. Justin Haley, I feel like the pricing is kind of where it should be, to be honest. He's a top 20 contender most weeks, and he was actually at the Clash last year. I started like a 3rd or 4th, but he was holding his own until Kyle Larson ended up dumping him. But unless he gets a good qualifying position, I don't really see a need to be overly excited about Justin Haley, unless he starts like dead last. Ty Gibbs, major price difference on DraftKings to FanDuel. So on FanDuel, he is $9,000. On DK, he is free at $5,300. We know he's super talented, was great in the Xfinity Series, always had the best of equipment though. Now in the 54 car for the Cup Series, replacing Kyle Busch on Joe Gibbs. I'm not really sure what to expect here. I'll have to see how he does in practice and where he qualifies, but if he can make the main event, that's a pretty cheap price point for a pretty talented driver and really good equipment. Like, we're not going to get a Joe Gibbs driver, I think, for the rest of the season. A JGR car at $5,300. That is wild. Harrison Burton, $5,200. I think really just everybody else, instead of just talking about every single one of them, we all know what they are. If they just happen to make it into the big race, well, yeah, they might be a decent source of value if they start dead last and can pick up a couple of spots. But I'm not going to go on my way to play them. It's just whoever makes it in. So there's only 27 spots. So we have, 36 drivers on the entry list. So there's going to be a few left off here, and it's probably going to come from these guys down here. So we'll see. But really just whoever starts dead last or something like that, they'll provide you value. But I'm not going out of my way to play any of these guys. But with that being said, guys, that's all I have for you for this week's video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you want to become a member of, in my opinion, the best NASCAR DFS community out there, links down below in the description or the pinned comment for that. And don't forget to join the free Discord if you can't become a member, and come in, chat it up with me. Ask anybody questions in there. Should be a good time to hang out. And also, before I forget, I do have the weekly DK contest, which if you're not already a member of that league, if you do join the contest, it'll automatically put you in there. But there's around 500 of you in there, And I think you can only make it a max of 200 people. There's already like 100 people joined in by like Friday morning. So I would recommend getting in if you want. It's just the clash. So for Daytona, it's probably going to fill quickly. We might have to make a couple of contests, but I'd love to have you in there. I do shout out the winners each and every single week on the channel. And it's just really a fun way for me to interact with the community. But I'll stop talking. I'll get out of your hair. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you on Sunday, hopefully, for the live stream.